Welcome to the Measurement Doctor Podcast. The doctors are in the house. And now your hosts, George and Lori Gill. All right, welcome to the Measurement Doctor Podcast. I'm George Gill.
I'm Lori Gill.
And here we are again with a great interview planned for today.
I know, I'm excited.
Are you excited, Lori?
I am, because not only is this guy influential in business, he's funny, he's good looking. Yeah, and I've seen him on the golf course. He's got some pretty sexy legs.
Not a bad golfer either.
He's a pretty good golfer.
I'm not going to comment on the legs.
And that's why I like golfing with Lori.
All right. Today's interviewee is Kevan Herod from Herod Financial Services. And Kevan is a longtime professional in the financial industry. In fact, throughout his career, he's worked using financial analysis needs analysis models or financial and estate plans on which to base his recommendations. In fact, Kevin's one of the most educated guys I know. And constantly educating himself on an ongoing basis. I know it doesn't say that in the bio, but I'm just telling you, I know that. This is
a super long bio, so we'll put it in the show notes, and let's just get to the interview.
Well, no, I'm going to add a couple of things here.
Okay.
His philosophy is that of a team approach to the financial and estate planning requirements of our clients. He works with clients and their accountants, lawyers, other financial and estate professionals when developing a client's estate and financial plan. I could go through his list of credentials. They're very, very impressive. And we've asked Kevan onto the show today to discuss something that is so often not thought of, and unfortunately sometimes till it's too late for businesses and entrepreneurs. This is a really important topic, and me being a young guy of 29,
God.
Again, you know.
You and I are the same age, George.
It's incredible. You can never be too young to start thinking about this if you're in business for yourself. And that's succession planning. That's today's topic.
And it's not even just business for yourself. It's business in general. Succession planning is, it's an unthought of thing at times, but it's critical to your business.
So, Mr. Kevan Herod, CEO of Herod Financial, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and Herod Financial, and how'd you get here?
Thanks, George and Lori, for that introduction. And if George and Lori are 29, then I must be 29 U.S.
That's funny.
That's awesome.
Told you.
I started in the business many years ago, and I was a graduate out of university, degree in geography and economics, and things were in a recession, and I entered a management program in the insurance company with North American Life, and the idea was to get some sales background and something to add to my resume, and I'm proud to say 36 years later, I'm still at it and moving along. And as you alluded to, George, I've taken pretty much a university course every year on some aspect of this business. And we have 2 office locations. We have 8.5 staff. So things are growing, and I do use the ensemble format to include, when you work with us, you work with me plus members of our staff. So if I get hit by the bus, part of my succession planning, people are there to step in and take over, so you're not left out in the cold or left without an advisor. So we've applied a lot of the stuff and are continuing to apply succession planning in our business. And I'm sort of in the point where we acquired a significant business in the last couple of years. And I see, as the person, the Carl, who we purchased the business with, he has stayed on and is slowly going to retire out of the business. But we have a succession plan with him, as I'm acquiring part of his business. And at the same time, I have a succession plan in place with some younger advisors in the office, so that if some point, like I plan on working forever, but at some point you're going to call it an end, there will be a smooth transition. So I'm in the enviable position of being able to see both ends of that spectrum on this. And it's quite enlightening and emotional at the same time.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of interesting points there that prior to us actually signing on for this interview, I hadn't even really considered as succession planning, but you made some interesting references to the way you run your business around succession planning, and that's kind of interesting. Okay, so although Herod Financial offers many different products and different services, and I know that because we're a client as well, I want to focus today on succession planning, obviously. So the very first question that I have is if you could elaborate on what succession planning is to you, because again, you brought up some stuff there I hadn't even considered.
Yeah, succession planning. It's a lot like saying estate planning, retirement planning. It's a big, big spectrum. But for most people, when we're talking about business succession planning, it's I've gone through the startup phase, I've developed the business, it's becoming a sizable asset to my overall net worth. And at some point, I want to reduce, it could be just the amount of time you're spending in business, or you want to pass the torch on to someone else who can take it over. And in a sense, you're leaving a legacy. Yet, you want to pass it on sort of intact with integrity and professionalism, and then be able to extract the value of that company out either immediately or over a period of time. And that's why it's such a broad subject. So when I talk with clients and we're starting this business succession discussion, one of my first questions is, well, tell me what it means to you to talk about this. Because yeah, I've taken courses and there's that technical side of the business that says, well, you do these, this, and this, where it's really come down because it's your baby and you've either built it from scratch or you've taken it over as a second or third generation and expanded the business. But it's your baby and there's a lot of emotion attached to this decision. And it often isn't an easy decision. But you need to start the process well ahead of time so you're not being into a forced decision, like due to poor health, as an example.
That's true.
So in that case, when should a business start to think about succession planning?
Well, when I was first taking the business courses, it really come up, it said it's easy to get into business, it's a lot harder to get out. And if your business is successful, it's harder to get out. So you need to start thinking about it almost from day one when you get into business.
Wow.
Now, the reality is, when you start a business, you're in that startup phase, there's a lot of excitement, a lot of things happening. You're not thinking about how to get out, you're thinking about how to survive. And then as time grows and the business has generally improved cash flows and your lifestyle is enhanced, you continue that growth period. So it's usually when most people start thinking about it is in sort of as the business is maturing, as it's developing, and you may say to yourself, I don't want to work quite so hard, but I like my lifestyle. So now what do I do? And when should you start thinking about it? Sooner than later. In your introduction, you mentioned that this is a big thing, and as the baby boomers have aged, that bubble is moving along, and we probably have more, like they talk about wealth being passed down generation to generation. There's more businesses that are coming on that are going to start passing over the torch or the business to other generations, whether it's family or outside members or members of like employees. There is a big boom there, and I see one of our roles as sort of being that specialist to help people to facilitate the transfer of the business and of the wealth, yet maintaining an income for them down the road.
I love the way you introduce that as when you're even starting to think about your business and put the initial plans together. Sounds very much like goal setting to me.
Yep.
You start with the end in mind. You visualize that outcome that you want to have happen. A lot of people refer to this almost like an exit strategy. What's your exit strategy going in kind of thing? And I think there's huge value in that, absolutely. Because I know with goal setting, if you don't if you don't have the end in mind, any road will do. You want to actually kind of put it out there right up front so that you're headed down that right path, and you can at least make adjustments as you go.
Yep. And the reason you have to start thinking about it from day one is when we talk about succession plan, usually you're talking about the voluntary part of it, where it says, yes, I've grown the business, now I want to start stepping back or on to something else. The two catastrophic things that can occur before you get to that stage or even during that stage is premature death and an illness. So if you have the catastrophic things, so often with the new business, we're talking about the catastrophic exit due to poor health or death. In a mature business, it's more of, I've got the asset, this is significant, what do I do with it?
So Kevin, then what does succession planning entail? So what are the components to consider when you're preparing for succession planning?
Yep, what are the components? And this is a big topic. Again, what I'm going to say is when we talk with most business owners, it's what is the emotional reasons that you're looking at exiting the business? You know, do you want to retire? Do you just want to bring up the next generation? You know, what's the reasons? And then that goes to the next step is that as you get out of business, how much control do you want to retain of that business, if any, over what period of time? And sometimes we see some issues between, usually in the intergenerational type of business where a family member's taken over. One of the more senior family members will want to retain too much control for too long before letting others take over. It's that giving up of control, because a lot of successful business people do like, I don't want to say control freaks, but are that type. They like to maintain control. And it's hard for them to relinquish control. And, you know, and I'm guilty of that. I see it when I'm working with Chris, and I can see it when I'm working with Carl. It's that willingness to let go of the control. So then you really got to look at the control, how active you want to be in the business. And then you got to start thinking about, well, what do I need as a personal income? And do you have enough other business or other investments or savings from other strategies we've used to have an independent source of money that the business really doesn't matter? Or is this your main asset? And probably 85% of the people, the business is the main asset.
Right.
And so we got to be careful with that, because if you're giving up control, you don't want to be the greeter at Walmart or taking a paper route. So you want to make sure you get your money or your value out smartly. And some business are, like a farmer, for example, is often rich in terms of property and buildings and things, but it's cash strapped. So we got to maintain that as well. So looking at what's in the business, the type of business that it is. So that's where we generally start. And then because it's so personal, it's really an extension of your personal financial plan or retirement plan, and ultimately your estate distribution plan. So if you are passing the business off to one family member, how do you treat the other family members? It doesn't have to be the same. It doesn't necessarily have to be equal. But how are you going to handle all of these other issues that come into play? And often when I'm starting with people, I draw a big wheel, put them in the center, and draw spokes out to all the people that are involved in their life from the business side to the personal. And we call that a mind map, where here's all the players. How do things interact with those players? So it's not so much the technical. This is more discussion of what they want to have happen.
And I'm already starting to hear some hints as to the answer to the next question I'm going to ask you, but maybe you can elaborate even more defined on it, is why engage somebody like yourself, a financial planner in succession planning, as opposed to, you know, a notepad, a pen, big circles myself? Why engage somebody like yourself?
Yeah, it's interesting about the notepad and pen, because that's where I start with most business owners. It's not a technical discussion.
That's where most of my ideas start.
What all this stuff.
The back of a napkin.
And our job, surprising enough, and whether I'm the quarterback of this or the accountant or lawyer is typically, it's one of us three, is to ask questions. And because, I say I've gone on courses and they give you a case study and there's all the nice little technical stuff that we can talk about, but it's all the other stuff we got to figure out first of how it's going to flow, and then use that technical information to solve the problems. And, our industry has wonderful tools to track and report, who owns what shares and that type of stuff. But you got to understand what we're trying to accomplish before you get into the technical. Why do you use somebody like myself? Is simply we're going to ask questions. We're removed enough that maybe we're not quite have the same emotional involvement.
Very true.
And the hardest thing to do really is even manage our own, because we're too close. We should be employing somebody outside to help us. So most business owners like you and Lori are great at what you do, but you don't deal in every day in what I deal in.
We're too emotionally attached, whereas you can come in and offer us things that we're not necessarily going to think about.
Yeah. And be that little, viewing it from the 30,000 foot level, not down at the weeds level. So, and that's why you use professionals. And the professionals we work with, there's myself, but most businesses and most people would have an accountant that they work with, and a lawyer, and maybe an HR person. And we need to have that discussion. And the lawyers, obviously, for agreements and the structure of the shares, the accountant's structure of the shares, but they also know a lot about your business that probably is not top of mind on your mind, like on your capture of depreciation and other refundable tax on hand, tax credit, and all that other kind of wonderful stuff that will ultimately be important. So I have to work with the lawyer and the accountant. But the other part of this, depending on how your succession plan is going to go, what management team do you have in place? And one question I'll have to ask the person, can you go away on holidays for more than 2 weeks at a time without your business falling apart? And if you can't, you need to work on the management team before you're ever going to get to the succession plan. You got to make sure things are in place that the business can run for a period of time without you. And then when somebody says, yeah, I can leave for 6 months, the question is, well, why are you still working? and then that goes back to the control, how much do I want in the day-to-day? And so that's where the discussion goes, around those types of things. And you employ us because we're going to help you with those right questions.
I think that's a great question, actually. Can you leave your business? As you said that question, I was thinking about it and thinking, that's very interesting. I pride myself in being able to work from anywhere, but the key there is you still are working.
Yep, yeah.
So it's kind of interesting.
And you kind of already answered our question about who should be a part of building your succession plan. You had said lawyers, financial planners, accountants.
But what if you don't have those people? What if you don't have a dedicated lawyer? Like, I know a lot of small businesses call a lawyer only when they're in trouble. So how does that play in?
Well, if you work with someone like myself or the accountant and lawyer, and this isn't a one-off, and I don't pretend that I have all the answers to all the questions. And so if you came to me and didn't have other advisors, and we've seen this where they have a controller or they have somebody that does their bookkeeping, but they don't have a proper accountant. And we can give introductions to accountants or to lawyers to help structure this that we work with. And maybe your existing accountant or lawyer, it may be somebody else. But behind like a firm like ours, we have a very good rapport with some other major financial companies. And through that, they have generally something called a tax and estate planning department, where I can get a specialist just in certain types of business, certain types of things. And they're not meant to replace your accountant. They're designed to, or a lawyer, they're meant to work with your accountant and lawyer. But that's all they do. They have a very narrow focus, but they know it this deep. And so a lot of the times we get to the technical aspect, I can rely on these other people to come in behind me. And so that's like, you have our Herod financial team, but there's another team behind us to help you through all of this stuff. So if you don't have an accountant or lawyer, not really an issue, because we're going to start the process, and it is a process. This doesn't happen in one meeting. It takes several.
And that brings up a really interesting point, because I really liked how you said, you have lawyers, accountants that you work with on a regular basis, and I think that's great, because then that your power team, for lack of better words, will be comfortable working with each other.
There's already a synergy.
There's already a synergy there, yeah.
Yep.
Do you find that is common? Like, if I were to go to my lawyer today and say I wanted to do a succession plan on my business, is he going to recommend that we pull in the accountant and the financial planner? Because I know lawyers, those guys. No, just kidding. But, what's going to happen there? Is it a common knowledge that you should have this pro team, or is it commonly promoted maybe?
I would think, in my experience and with the accountants and lawyers I've worked with, it's a common approach. Okay. And a lot of them will say, we know this area, we don't really know about this other stuff. You need to get an advisor in here that can complement what we're doing. And my experience over the number of years is it's very common to work in a group effort type of thing. And I strongly encourage it. And if any one advisor or any caliber says they can do it all, I question it, because I think the synergy you get by having the various professionals in, you get a better solution than just one-off.
Okay,
so granted, we've had a couple of times, George, where the discussion it's pretty clear cut and dry. You got to do a couple of certain things first, and then we have to bring in the rest of the team. Right. But it is a team approach in my mind.
Okay, so let's just going back to what you said, because I just found it very interesting how we approached it like an exit strategy up front. If I'm just starting the business and I'm listening to this podcast and I'm saying, hey, that sounds awesome, I want to engage somebody. Obviously, an accountant is going to be premature because I have no books yet. I'm in the planning stages, and who do I call? Now, knowing you, I'm just going to add to that question. Knowing you, you're very creative, and you have a very entrepreneurial mindset. So I could see sitting down with you and having a conversation and really taking some value out of that. But that may or may not be the common relationship that a business has with their financial planner, maybe or not, But where am I going to get the most value at those early stages? Even though we're probably not going to cement something at those early stages, who am I going to get the most value from and why?
I would say you would deal with a financial planner, someone like myself. And there's been many a times I've sat with people and I probably invested a lot more of my time. And as you're right, they're starting out, they don't have any money to pay anything. But over the years of working together with people, that loyalty or what the work we did up front is appreciated. Clients stay with us, and we develop all of our lines of business with that client over the years. Right. And sometimes the clients have actually entered into talking about the exit strategy without formally acknowledging it first, because we've been talking about it for quite a few years. And I keep reasonably good notes. And I said, well, remember we talked about this, and it was going, here's the overall direction. That was a year ago, and the client says, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. So you need a good planner, and whether it's my type of background or the accountant or lawyer, but someone you can have that big picture, general discussion, and start narrowing down sort of a plan or a track.
That's great.
And whether it's me or who, but you got to have that rapport. And I heard from one of the speakers at one time, he said to the individual, you're putting me on your payroll, but I'm like a consultant to your business, and we're only going to get paid when we actually do something. So a lot of this, we're going to have a big discussion over the front of it and grow over time with you. And that's how you become a client. That's how you and I became clients, George. On both my business and your business.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, what's the bad news if, businesses don't succession plan? What's
the bad news?
What's the bad news?
Yeah. What's the bad news? Good question. the bad news, and George, you sort of alluded to right at the start about getting that big picture and planning, because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, is the essential quote.
You can't have
And
that quote.
if,
I'm sure it's
yeah,
been quoted before.
so, and if you need a will, you need powers of attorney, you need a business agreement, depending on your business structure. Without those, it gets imposed by the government, if you don't have a will, for example. And then you've got the family members. And like if something happens to you and to Lori, who takes over your business? What are the kids going to do? Who's going to step up? And you need some of that planning. So I would say if you don't start the planning process, you got a big disaster on your hands. And you're not going to get value for your business. It'll be sold at a major discount.
I refer to that as an accident waiting for a time to happen, because it's not when, it's just or if.
It's not when. If, it's when.
Yeah,
it's when.
Exactly.
Yep, precisely.
What are the 2 or 3 common mistakes that you see entrepreneurs making when deciding who will succeed them? Get really specific here.
Yeah, trying to be to detail here. I often see that sometimes the business owners haven't done enough upfront planning, and usually there's a health change, and now they're rushing. And when you rush, you make mistakes. So again, by not starting the process early enough, and then not investing enough in the team, so that you can go on those long holidays and the business run without you. That's how you know whether you can start selling out or leaving, because you've got the team in place. So it's making sure you invest in your business, in your team, is to me is critical. And once you've done that, then the other stuff gets far easier in structuring. And I'm going to jump into the technical side. Do we use holding companies or operating companies only? Are we using various forms of family trusts, other types of trusts? Are we making use of the capital dividend account in the investment holding company? Those kinds of things. Do you do an estate freeze? Who's going to take the common? Who's going to take the preferred? Yes, we got to go through that technical part, but you got to get the other stuff in place first, in my mind.
It really comes back to that question: can you go away for 2 weeks and your business
Yep.
will run without you?
And to me, that's a good indicator. Yeah. The other question I ask a lot of clients, I ask a lot, what things keep you up at night about your business? What things do you like about your business? And because we want to hear the positives as well as some of the negatives as we go through this. And if we were sitting back 5 years from today, what do you want to have happen with your business over the next 5 years for you to feel good about things? And it's that kind of information that helps us with all the technical side of the solution, like the product side of things. Products are the products, so.
Right. And succession planning doesn't necessarily mean that I have to be handing my business off to somebody.
No.
I don't necessarily have anybody that I want to hand the business off to per se, right?
And then it's how do you do a wind-up of the business, and that may be involved in how are you making sure you're taking your money out or taking value out of your business, sort of taking it from the business pocket and shifting it over to the personal asset, and doing that in an orderly fashion, not haphazard. And what underlines a lot of this is what is the tax implications of all those decisions. So when we walk through the possible solutions, we got to talk about the control and what you're doing, but ultimately we got to say, okay, what are the tax problems here? Yet the tax issue shouldn't be the tail that wags the dog. You shouldn't be doing something just because of tax.
Right.
It's important, but it's not the only factor. So, and I've seen some solutions where it's so tax driven, you're not actually really meeting all the other goals and objectives. And then you talk about things about your health. What's your health like? And I've had like one individual talked to me about their business, and they were wanting to look at getting out and selling out. Their health is good, but their spouse isn't, or one of their kids isn't in good health. So it's not so much their health. They're getting out because of some other reasons that we have to bring into account. So it's tax, it's all of these things that we got to talk about with the client to make sure we are on the right track in our solutions.
So the succession plan document's kind of like a living, breathing document. It's something that should be reviewed and nurtured and modified as things
as there's significant event changes or significant changes in the rules, such as the capital gains exemption, the small business deductions. So we often talk to people as the rules and the tax structure changes. Does our strategy still make sense given your overall goals? Right. So you have goals, and then you have the action plan or the strategy to get there.
So before seeking professional help, what are some questions I should be asking myself in preparing to go forward with succession planning?
Well, ideally a client comes in with all those questions that I posed earlier and has an answer to them all. But basically, I think the first and foremost is you got to think about over the next few years, what do I want to have happen? What do I want my life to look like? And don't worry about the technical numbers, because we'll get to that. But in general terms, what do I want to happen in my life and in the business component? Do I want to wind it up, or do I want to see it taken over or left as a legacy? Or what do you want?
So it's kind of like what George alluded to in the beginning of the conversation. It's really like a goal planning or goal setting.
Very much so. Very much so. And some people think, well, I've done all this stuff, and it's now what do I do? And depending on what I'm going to call degree or large the company is, it depends how easy or complicated it is to get out. And the time element, we've been brought in on some things where a lot of the work was already done by some other professionals. Our job was more of a technical role, and probably a year and a half, everything was wrapped up. I've been involved in some other ones, and they've started the discussion of how they're going to do this, and it's because there's other business partners and things. It's 3 years later, and they haven't really moved that far forward. So, and that's been 3 years. So part of my job is to be the catalyst, but, you can only bug so much too. So, and so if you have 3 or 4 partners and one looking to get out and the other guys are dragging their feet, you have some issues. So that's why starting early is better than starting later or starting to get it down on paper.
Right.
Because it does take time. This rarely doesn't happen overnight. A small business, you can shut the doors and close up, but that's not necessarily the most effective strategy.
No. And I think it's really hard for people to get their mind around entrepreneurs, especially when they have, starting out, they have a million different things going on in their head. They're wearing many hats. How does this fit in place? But if you go with this mentality of this is going to be part of the foundation of how I run my business, is I'm always going to have a plan and an end goal. Yep. It kind of changes that mindset because it's like you said up front, your main focus when you're starting out is just surviving. And that's not a good mindset to be in, although it might be a physical reality. It doesn't have to be the mental reality.
Right. And there's many good business books written on this. And one of the probably older books, it was the E-Myth book by Michael Gerber.
Oh yeah, we have that.
Yeah, and when you read that, and I probably go through that every couple of years, I take another look at it. Yeah. And we employed a lot of the structure of getting, the mission, the vision, what are our goals, identifying the roles. Now the roles keep changing, at least they do in our company as the business has grown. Our various roles of the people have changed, and we've added in positions to do things, but we have to have that roles and goal type of and the responsibility and accountability in all of those positions. And the basis of Michael Gerber's book was you identify all these roles and goals and you set up the procedure, And if you're starting out, your name is in almost every one of those boxes. By the time you just want to be in the shareholder box and have everybody else doing things efficiently and effectively for you.
Yeah.
And
that
efficient and
book should be
effective
on
are two different
everybody's
words.
shelf.
Everybody's list. And you say it's an old book, but it's still really true.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put a link in the show notes to that book. Absolutely every entrepreneur should have that. 100%. Great book. I read it every couple of years as well. It's just awesome. Yeah. All right. So what questions haven't I asked you that I should be about succession planning?
Yes, well, I think we covered just about everything, George.
Dang, I'm good. You're pretty good too.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. But I think the biggest thing of this is to, as a business owner, when you're talking with someone, obviously you got to deal with somebody you like and trust. Like, I think that goes a long way, and the trust factor is probably the most important. But you got to be willing to talk to me about what you like that you're doing, what's going well, and what isn't going well, where you want to see improvements. And I joke about this, but we had one business owner in, and I asked him about, his family, and he said he had 3 kids, and I like 2 of them. Now, I don't necessarily need all the details, but there's always some behind-the-scene dynamics, right? So you got to be upfront with us, because if I'm recommending something, and that's not what you want, I need to know a little bit of the reason. I don't know all the details. This isn't a soap opera, but we got to understand all the dynamics in that mind, like what I call the mind map of who you're relating to as business owners.
Yeah.
So it's don't hold anything back, but don't divulge, all the tedious little details.
Don't need the details.
And that goes right back to, starting that relationship early, even before you might think it's necessary, so that relationship does start to evolve.
Yep.
And if that financial planner isn't willing to take that time, that at the beginning when really you are no value to them whatsoever per se, then that's probably not the relationship you want to waste years on developing anyways. So,
well, and that's true. And when we look for clients, we look for people who I would say are open, willing to communicate, economic potential, and they'll listen. Because we can write up a beautiful looking plan, but if you're not going to listen to us, it's a wasted effort, other than we'll get paid somehow out of this, but you're not putting it into place. So we look for people who have problems, and that old thing, the bigger the problem, the bigger the challenge, the more fun this is going to be, is we like this, and to me, this is a very exciting time to be in business, and time as the number of businesses are going to look for succession planning in some form. And we just know quite the level of detail and form going forward. So if you say, what should the person do, is make sure you communicate with your advisor.
Cool.
Which kind of leads us to our last question here, because we always like to end the interview with, if you could give one piece of advice that our listeners could take action on today that would benefit their business, what would it be?
Well, I think I just said it. Probably make sure you communicate. And it's not only communicating with the advisor. If you have business partners, we want to make sure there's good communication there. And if the business partner is a spouse, we really got to make sure you're both on the same page and talking the same language.
Yeah, talk my language.
Yeah.
I'm
working on that.
Because we've had interviews where, what do you want to have happen? And
they're both on different tangents.
You're saying, and we especially notice this in farm practices of what's going to happen with the farm. The family, on a big farm. But we also see it in other business where if we can talk to the owners, and they got different opinions of how things should go forward in the succession plan.
I always say George is hallucinating, so we have different hallucinations.
Yeah.
essentially you got to have all the players in the room,
Yep.
all the stakeholders. So I think a good tangent of that is if you don't have a succession plan in place, it's time to take the first step and source out a financial planner, and at least start to have that conversation. No matter how new or old your business is, it's something you need to start thinking about and talking about. So first step, you could pick up the phone and just book an appointment, because
That's right.
that'll get it going. That'll
That's
get you
right.
in play. Right.
You have a discussion with your advisor, and
Yeah.
and probably in that first interview, or even a couple of interviews, you're not going to come to any conclusion.
Right.
It's discovery. It's talking about what's important to you, not what's important to the advisor. What's important to you, the business owner.
Right.
That's what it's about.
All right, let's head into the examination room.
It's time for the examination room.
All right, Kevin. Every podcast episode, we take a quote, because we all love quotes, and we decipher it. We dig in and see what it's all about. I'm really interested in picking at your brain and seeing what you think on these. So here's the quote, and you get to tell us what this means to you, and then Lori gets to tell the world what it means to her as well. So that's good. So here's the quote. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. And that was said by Soren Kierkegaard. I hope Kierkegaard. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Soren Kierkegaard. I'll repeat it one more time for you. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. What are your thoughts on that?
Tremendous quote. Yeah, you're going to have to send me that one, because I don't have that in my list of quotable quotes here. I don't think I have.
See,
But-
even Kevin has a list. Everybody
Yeah,
loves quotes.
I do.
Everybody
I got a
does
list of, and we scroll through of all the great sayings. But there's another quote, and the name of the author escapes me. It also says, you got to go through life anyways. You may as well enjoy it. So
True.
the
No cheating.
Yeah, the problems, and you go back to that elastic band. The more you stretch the elastic band, the more it stretches, the further it stretches. So if you can handle the problems you're dealing with right now, and you're successful, life is going to hand you more and bigger problems, and you will grow personally by taking on those challenges in that. So, Dr. Norman Vincent Peale was the other one. He says, you know you're alive when you've got lots of problems. So give me lots of problems. And yeah, you don't want to be down so you're overburdened or overwhelmed, but life can bring you challenges. And if you tackle them, stay positive, and work on things one piece at a time, then your life will improve over time. And the quality of the problems and the quality of people you get to meet grow exponentially. So life is good.
Very good, very good. What do you think?
Kevin's-
That's awesome. by the way. I
Kevin's
like
deep
that.
like you.
That was pretty good.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
All right.
Boy, you're a tough act to follow.
What do you think, Laura?
Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to experienced. Well, I think you need to enjoy every aspect of your life. And it's not like when we're born, we come with a manual, or that life has a manual. You're going to experience things along the way, good or bad. And that's a part of who you are and what makes you, have a fulfilling life. So you take out of it what you put into it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to go back to Kevin's other comment and quote about, if you don't have a lot of problems, you're not alive. I think that really kind of is a subheading to this quote, because the reality is that life being experienced is about living day to day and solving those problems as they come along. I love the elastic band analogy, because the bigger the problems I have, the better job I know I'm doing. Because, if you're not playing a big game, if you're not playing at your peak level, you're not going to have big problems. That is nothing to be proud of. not a darn thing to be proud of. You want big challenges happening, which means you're playing at your level. You're playing at your peak.
You've got to
right?
step out to get there.
And therefore, you're experiencing life.
You're experiencing life. Whew.
There we go. All right. So leave us some comments on the measurementdoctor.com podcast episode, I don't know, MD040, I think.
I'm not sure.
And tell us what you think of that quote, because that's a really, really good one. Now, Kevin, if someone wants to reach out and contact you, what's the best way to do so, to connect with you?
Well, George, probably the best way, if you want to send an email, is send it to kherod@herodfinancial.com, or just call our number. We have a local number and a toll-free number. The local number is 705.
We'll put those in the show notes. Yep.
741-5287. Call somebody like it could be Mary, Amy, Roberta, or somebody will start that initial. We'll take your call and start the process. And if I'm available, I'll be happy to chat with you. If I'm in an appointment, they'll arrange a time for us to chat.
Awesome.
That's fantastic. Well, Kevin, this
Great.
has been really good. Thank you so much for
A lot of
taking your
fun.
time. It has been, and I think hopefully our listeners got a lot of value out of that, because there was a ton of good advice there, not only on succession planning, but between the lines on how to organize your company and your business. That's fantastic.
Awesome.
All right. Have a fantastic day. Take care.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Al.
Kevin.
Bye-bye.
Bye.